The details of some days in our lives remain imprinted on our memories, and even 18 years later can be recalled in great description. Such is a day that Jean and our son Michael, our oldest son Michael, and I, such was a day when we sat in a waiting room waiting for the report of an ultrasound, just like we've all sat in waiting rooms for a word about a loved one's condition. I suppose that some of you might think it a little silly, and perhaps it is, that this particular loved one had 4 legs, long droopy ears, slobbered all over you, and was the subject of our great worry and concern. But silly or not, we were there. Well, the word was not good. A sarcoma, a cancerous mass, was on her right kidney. Surgery would cost $1,500, and we would have done it if it would have helped. But in this case, it would have only put her through more suffering, we were told. And so we took the recommendation of the doctor, and we brought Annie the Basset Hound home to spoil her rotten in whatever days she had left. Turns out Annie had 3 years left. Now maybe it's the preacher in me, but I'm always looking for a sermon in life's events. That I think God taught me some things through Annie the Basset Hound that I've called the Gospel According to Annie the Basset Hound, an unlikely prophet. First of all, Annie taught me to be who God created me to be. Annie, as far as I know, never for one moment in her life tried to act like anything other than a Basset Hound. Jean's dad, who didn't quite fully understand our great affection for Annie, used to say about her, "It's like living with a hog in the house." Which I know some people do. There was nothing pretentious or put on about Annie as a Basset Hound. Like all Basset Hounds, she was slow and lazy and smelly and stubborn. Maybe like someone you live with. But she was also incredibly affectionate and gentle. God made her with a super sensitive sense of smell, and she used that to get what she wanted and needed in life. She had huge bags under her eyes, and the skin on her neck hung to the floor, but that was okay with her. When she wanted something, or she was warning us about something, she let out a deep bay. She was who she was and completely comfortable with herself. She simply lived her Basset Hound life in the way God made her to live. She did not expend 1 ounce of energy trying to control or reshape the pathway of her life. Now, we humans call that perhaps animal instinct. Maybe in reality it's the purest form of trust. From the beginnings of creation, God has sought from his creatures trust. And of all the species that God has made, we humans seem to struggle the most with trusting. All that God asked of Adam and Eve was for them to trust him. He gave them the option of following the pathway he'd set them upon, or the option of wandering astray. And that has continued to be the choice humankind has been offered throughout the ages. Follow the path God lays out for us or wander astray. We can choose to be who God created us to be, or we can live against the grain and fall short of his glory for our lives. The story of God's people is a story of a people ever wandering off the path, and a God who seeks to bring them back to a promised land. It's a story of a people who fight against being who God created and intended them to be. It is a story of a people who can't quite bring themselves to fully trust that God knows what God is doing. And they're ever trying to take matters into their own hands. In our scripture read by Jim this morning, we come to the opening scene in the age-old drama of God bringing his wandering people out of the Exodus on a journey toward the Promised Land. Now, this part of the drama focuses on the man that God has chosen to be the leader of this Exodus and our second unlikely prophet this morning. For those of us living in 21st century America, we'll probably forever picture the man Moses as Charlton Heston, boldly standing forth, parting the waters of the Red Sea. But I'm not so sure Moses really looked like Charlton Heston. Certainly the Moses we meet in this opening scene is not the man of dogged determination and unbridled courage. Maybe in his younger days, Moses had displayed signs of rock-solid self-confidence. You'll remember the story of Moses' childhood and youth, how he was found as a baby by Pharaoh's daughter, raised as an Egyptian. But one day when he saw a Hebrew slave being abused by his Egyptian slave owner, Moses arrogantly took matters into his own hands and he killed the Egyptian. Remember that? Moses was not some young, energetic, idealistic hotshot, though, in this scene when God calls him. For at this point, Moses is at least old enough to get his AARP card and probably collect his Social Security check. It was only after Moses had matured to the point of being accepting of both his gifts and his limitations that God was able to use Moses. Because it was only at this point of maturity that Moses had come to trust God more than his own ways. It was only at this point of maturity and life experience that Moses was finally willing to go on God's path to be who God created him to be. Now, in our culture, we glorify youth, and we love our youth. And we all try our best to look like them, don't we? Various products and the ways we dress. But I think we too often neglect the great value of life's seasoning, which comes with age, only with age. And this brings me to our third unlikely prophet. He spent the majority of his life going from job to job, never quite satisfied in any job. It was not until the age of 65. Few of you reached that age. Many of you haven't yet. But it was not until the age of 65 that this man began to do what he'd always wanted to do, fried chicken. He'd always loved frying chicken. He'd always been good at frying chicken. But it was not until this point of maturity that he was finally ready to settle down and do what he did best. And as the late Paul Harvey says, we know the rest of the story, don't we? Kentucky Fried Chicken's now in 22 countries around the world. Colonel Harlan Sanders' face on every bucket of it that goes out. God calls us to be who he created us to be and to trust that he'll take care of things from there. I've learned that from a few unlikely prophets. I also have learned that life's too short to sweat the small stuff. Our refrigerator died this weekend. It's only 3.5 years old, and I fought with GE for most of its life. We finally gave up. You can't beat corporate America. And it finally died completely. And I got on Facebook, and I posted a post that was about this long with my rant against that awful corporation. And I left it up there for about 3 minutes. And then I looked again at the television and saw what the people of Texas were facing. Right. And I thought, what an inconvenience I've suffered. It's not a real problem. So I've learned somewhat not to sweat the small stuff. The things we worry about, the things we give ourselves ulcers and high blood pressure over, the things we stay up nights stewing over, the things we allow to come between us and our loved ones, most of the time are not truly worth, as the saying goes, a hill of beans. We so often lose perspective and we make of things much more than they need to be made of. And Jesus reminds us of that when he says, look at the lilies of the field, how they grow. They don't spin or labor, yet not even Solomon in all his splendor had a wardrobe to match that field of lilies. Look at the birds of the air and the beasts of the field and the fish of the sea. They don't worry about the stock market or insurance policies or what they wear or drive or where they live. And again, it comes back to that one word, trust. Can we live our lives trusting that God will have our back? Is the God we claim to worship and serve trustworthy enough for us to surrender our worries to him and go with the flow and love as he loved? I've learned that somewhat through a few unlikely prophets like Annie Bassett. I've also learned the value of not carrying a grudge. You know, Annie, she'd get angry. Oh my goodness, would she get angry? She and our Springer Spaniel at the time would go at it. But in a matter of minutes, if not seconds, she'd be over it. She'd forgotten about it. She followed God's ways in that she remembered transgressions no more. What a gift it would be if we could do the same with those we love. Oh, we hang on, don't we? We hang on, we rehash over and over again. Sometimes we save them up like top value stamps. Remember those? And we cash them in all at once. Every wrong ever been done to us. We can't let go of them, even when they destroy us and our most important relationships. There is no concept or action perhaps more central to the gospel message of Jesus Christ than forgiveness. Forgiveness is at the heart of our salvation. Our eternity rests in our capacity to forgive. The doors to God's kingdom swing on the hinges of forgiveness, and Jesus says only if we can forgive one another will we experience the fullness of God's forgiveness in our own lives. So I've learned the value of forgiving and forgetting. And finally, I've learned through Annie and other unlikely prophets to cherish and be grateful for and to get excited about the small gifts of life, like milk bones. Even in her agedness and illness, her eyes would still light up, her tail would still wag at the sight of a milk bone. Everywhere around us in life are milk bones. The promised land of milk and honey is not all that far off if we'll but open our eyes to it. For God has placed in our midst countless, priceless gifts. Look around you today. A gift. Look into the eyes of those whom you love and love you. Listen to the laughter of a child. Smell the fragrance of a somewhat cooler August day. Taste the sweetness of summer melon. Touch the softness of a baby's tiny hand. Pet the head of a droopy-eared, sagging-eyed, slobbering basset hound if you get a chance. And you will know God is good all the time. And all the time, God is good. For the unlikely prophets you place in our lives, we thank you for the word you